Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 10, Feminist Approach. And our topic is the historical context. We noted the 19th century academic context within which the comparative method arose. Most recent anthropologists would point out to the fact that the colonialism and the access to the study of other cultures was a political context that cannot be wished away. This political context was in a manner camouflaged owing to the unquestioned dominance of Western power and Western scholarship. The natives have just begun talking back. The political context also went unnoticed because the method explicitly advocated value neutrality and indeed took pains to delineate guidelines to avoid obvious pitfalls of bias. In sharp contrast, the feminist approach has an overt political context and also overtly states its value preferences. A commitment to gender equality is embedded within the approach. While the first phase of women's movement dates back to the suffrage movement of the West and the national movement in the colonized countries like ours, it is only with the second phase of the women movement in 1970s that a systematic interrogation of the social sciences from a feminist approach took place. Unlike the lineage of the comparative method, as shown by Chaudhary, the feminist method has an inextricable link with the feminist movement. The issue here is not whether each practitioner of feminist scholarship is an active or not. The issue is that the basis of feminist knowledge emerged from a radical movement that questioned the given social order as both neutral and divinely destined. We discussed the far-reaching impact of changing or not changing surnames. Furthermore, by 1980s, it was becoming clear that the feminist scientific revolution, like those that Kuhan had studied, would not take place without resistance. As Kuhan has noted, scientific disciplines are aptly named. They discipline thought by making some ideas seem neutral and others almost unthinkable. The practice of science involves commitments to such disciplines. The commitments of the scholarly community to certain ideas and ways of thinking seem to stand in the way of new theories, however useful they might prove to be in the long run, as we will shortly discuss in the next section on features of the feminist approach to sociology. While calling for a critical appraisal of research in women's studies, Krishnaraj said feminist research is expected to use theory not so much to test hypotheses, but develop a better understanding through grounded concepts. Let us now turn to the stages in the growth of a feminist approach and then to key features of the feminist method. But before proceeding to this important section of the unit, as we need to complete for fully understanding the thinking evolved in pursuing the feminist method. Now let us move to the point features of the feminist method. Much in the case of the comparative method, while there are certainly some common features within the vast body of studies that warrant them being called comparative or feminist, it is important to assert that the important differences also characterize what can be broadly termed the feminist method. For purposes of elucidation, I will first begin with the stages in the development of a feminist approach to sociology, and then see what could be seen methodologically as some common features. The first stage is in the development of a feminist approach in sociology. A useful way to mark the growth of a feminist approach to sociology is to identify three stages in the study of gender-related issues since 1970. Initially, the emphasis was on sex differences and the extent to which such differences might based in biological properties of individuals. In the second stage, the focus shifted to individual level sex roles and socialization, exposing gender as the product of specific social arrangements, although still conceptualizing it as an individual trait. And the third is the hallmark of the third stage is the recognition of the centrality of gender as an organizing principle in all social systems, including work, politics, everyday interaction, families, economic development, law, education, and a host of other social domains. As our understanding of gender has become more social, so has our awareness that gender is experienced and organized in race and class specific ways. We can now usefully discuss some key features of the feminist method in the light of the above three stages. The next point is some key features. It has already been emphasized that the important differences exist between the different feminist approaches, along with noting down the direct and indirect links with different political and theoretical approaches. We are here making a case of delineating what a feminist method in sociology entails. To start with, we can clearly distinguish between the traditional sociological approach to gender and the feminist approach. Most introductory sociology textbooks still treat gender as an individual attribute and gender inequality as an outcome of childhood socialization. In contrast, current feminist thinking stresses the far greater input of the division of labor, power, social control, violence, and ideology as structural and interactional basis of inequality, not only between women and men, but among women and men of diverse social classes and racial ethnic groups. Gorlick referred to Maria Mies, who had in the 1970s provided methodological guidelines for feminist research. She stressed the need for replacing the practice of value-free research with a conscious bias towards women's struggle for social change. Secondly, she made a case for co-scienticization of the researcher as well as the researched. Let us now outline the following key features that mark the feminist method. The point is, feminist sociology argues that research designs were based on men's experience. Feminist social scientists demanded a fundamental transformation in how questions are asked and what criteria are employed to define an answer as acceptable. Illustrative of this is the long practice of assuming that the head of the household is the eldest male member. It has been increasingly shown that the number of female-headed houses in the rural areas of India is very high. But the very concept of a head of the household was based on the urban middle-class men's experience that women are housewives. Another very common example is the manner that the category work assumed that it is meant regular work outside the home for which wages were given. However, it has been increasingly realized that women for the most part work in the informal sector in what are termed as the household production units. Instances in the city of Delhi would be bangle and toy making, jardoji, assembling of electronic parts, and that are subcontracted to poor women in the slums, domestic workers, etc. Indeed, concerted efforts were made in the 1991 census to educate both census personnel and ordinary citizens that breaking stone or carrying bricks is also work. Apart from this informal work which is growing with globalization, the idea that homework, housework is also work is still considered a lie. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the self-learning podcast.